So Alex, just first of all, walk us through what it is you saw.
I want to be careful because it's been 16 years since that event.
This was 2004.
November 14th, 2004. And I just want to be careful because we know, right, that the science of the mind and the science of the memory we shouldn't rely too much on my technical account at this point. But I will point out that the other aircrew and I made thorough debriefs on that day within minutes of landing, and that I made a written account with as many arrows and details and including comms and bearings and altitudes and all of that I could within, I would say, hours of landing. And then within a few years, gave thorough, almost interrogation style details to members of the Office of Naval Intelligence and ATIP. But I'll tell you overall what happened was that we were on a routine training mission off the coast of Southern California, off the USS Nimitz, which is an aircraft carrier. I was with VFA 41, which is a strike fighter squadron, as a new pilot. We were heading off to do air intercepts. We were heading off to do like a scrimmage, a practice air-to-air run, and we were redirected. We were given vectors to go and intercept, see if we could intercept and identify a real-world contact. So we are scanning where we would expect to see something that we're merging with, and we don't see it. But instead we do see something in the water below us. And so my heart sank. I went from being excited that we might go get those bad guys to, oh no, those bad guys have crashed and are sinking, and now we're on scene commanders for search and rescue effort. And then almost as soon as that happened, enter stage left, the tic-tac, and that's what we affectionately refer to it as, because that's what it looked like. I get a lot of questions, what did it look like? And I say, have you ever had a tic-tac? It looked like a little oblong, little from our perspective at our altitude, but about the size of a normal aircraft fuselage. And it was white, it was sort of a matte finish, just like a tic-tac. And it behaved in a way that we were surprised, unnerved. It accelerated, or it almost didn't accelerate, right? It sort of jumped from spot to spot and tumbled around in a way that was unpredictable. And so, again, my commanding officer, Dave Fravor, Commander Fravor at the time, he took an aggressive maneuver to engage with it. Me being the wingman and also sort of uncomfortable and inexperienced, I said, okay, I've got high cover, which basically means I'm going to hang out over here. I got your back, but I'm not going to get involved too closely. And so he turned with it, and then it just disappeared. It zoomed out of the picture so fast that we all then were scrambling on the radio. And the whole time we're on the radio with each other, just sort of losing our minds.
I'm sure you've certainly given this a lot of thought, and I'm sure you've been asked a gazillion times, but do you believe, what do you think of it? What do you think it was?
Yeah, every time I'm asked about this, they say, well, what was it? I'm not qualified to make that analysis. And part of the reason I agreed to speak with you and I agreed to speak on 60 Minutes the other night was that I'm trying to reduce the stigma for other aircrew so that if they see something or when they see something, they'll say something, and that they will not feel embarrassed or ashamed to make the reports, and that they'll know how to make the reports and where to make the reports, and that they'll contribute to this data pool of information that we have so that those who are professional intelligence analysts and scientists can look at that information that is collected and consolidated, and that they can make some really sound, reasonable, rational conclusions. Because no matter what size you are of the UFO wars, which I'm actually just learning about now, and shout out to my new friends on hashtag UFO Twitter, that it's fascinating. I am fascinated with their fascination. And so whether they are hardcore enthusiasts or conspiracy theorists or hardcore debunkers. Or even there's like this tribe of religious fanatics who are just, I don't quite understand them yet, but there are all these different camps. And at the core, no matter how much they're attacking each other, what I see is that they all want answers. They all want to know what it was. And we can't do that if we're just attacking each other, or if we're shaming each other, or sensationalizing it. We really have to cooperate and again, get more information, get more evidence so that we can come to some sound conclusions.
If you can write a general lat long where we're at, and then the number of contacts you got, get the course and speed meters off them. You know what I mean? And road a position to us. Make bearings. Might be helpful too. Eyes up. Eyes down.
System 2, maintain track as best you can.
Track 781 just sped up to 46 knots, 50 knots, closing in. Oh, actually 38 knots. Holy shit, it's going fast.
That one's pretty much perfectly 000 relative, right?
Yeah.
263 at 3 miles, 55 knots speed.
We're aware of the report requirement, and our team at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is, of course, actively working on that report. And we take reports of incursions into our airspace by any aircraft, identified or unidentified, very seriously and investigate each one. But OD and I would be working on that report, and in terms of disclosure, that would be up to them.
I guess in all seriousness, though, can you characterize the president's concerns about this phenomenon? I mean, it is this concept of objects in U.S. airspace that are either origin from other nations or other entities, but what is the concern of the president that this phenomenon seems to occur in the national security apparatus?
Well, I think broadly speaking, the fact that we have a team that's actively working on a report, certainly the safety of our personnel, security of our operations, our airspace are of paramount concern, whether that is identified or unidentified aircraft. And we don't discuss that publicly for a range of reasons, but certainly the president supports the OD and I putting together a report and following through on that commitment.
Oh, fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Well, if there's look at that thing. It's rotating.
Objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
We just have to face the fact that maybe we're not alone in the universe, which hurts our ego a little bit.
And the Senate wants answers.
Anything that enters an airspace that's not supposed to be there is a threat.
My name is Brian Bender, and this is my abduction story. I call it my abduction story because sometimes I felt like I was getting sucked into this UFO enthusiast world. Here is your guide to understanding what's going on with the Pentagon and UFOs. Politico started delving into the UFO issue when we reported one of the first stories about the existence of a Pentagon UFO research office. It's not just they have an office that's looking into this, but there's some real experiences that our pilots are reporting that are getting at least some attention in the Pentagon. What I came to understand was that even within the military, there was a reluctance to look into these things because I think military personnel have been concerned about being labeled, tinfoil hat wearing kooks if they start talking about UFOs. But clearly, there were enough reports that they really couldn't ignore it. Since the UFO task force became news in 2017, more politicians are more comfortable than ever talking about unknown objects in the sky.
We have lots of reports about what we call unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Let's take a quick look back at how this all happened. In 1952, the U.S. Air Force launched Project Blue Book to look into UFO sightings, but you'll hear more about that later on. Fast forward to 2008, the Pentagon's secret UFO office known as ATIP was established. It wasn't until 2017 when footage of Navy pilots witnessing UFOs leaked and the existence of the Pentagon UFO office became known that the story really started to get interesting. By 2019, members of Congress were receiving classified briefings about UFOs. In 2020, the Senate Intelligence Committee, led by Senator Marco Rubio, decides they want to request a government report on UFOs. A public report that not only pulls together what the government might know about UFOs, but more importantly, what they're doing to get to the bottom of these mysteries. When the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program was created at the Pentagon, it was given a fairly innocuous-sounding military name. That way, there was no reference to UFOs. In the summer of 2017, my reporting uncovered that this office had existed. They'd been given a significant amount of resources, and so I started digging to find out the origins of the office, also where all that money was spent. And it was former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid who secured $22 million to establish the UFO's ATIP program. Next on our journey, we talked to some politicians themselves. Good morning, Senator Reid. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I was the first to get involved in this. And much to the consternation of my staff, they told me, stay the hell away from this. It's not anything that's going to help you.
So at the time, it sounds like your political advisors thought that this could be damaging politically. In other words, if you're associated with this, people will think Harry Reid has lost it.
It's not just a bunch of weirdos that are thinking about this. I think it's people who are really curious. The more time we spend on this, the more people are beginning to understand.
Are you hopeful that some of these very secretive agencies will be willing to share more of what they're seeing, what they're gathering?
What we have to do is understand that there are different levels of transparency. I think the administration has an obligation to make sure that what information they have that is important to the security of our country, that they make sure members of Congress know what's going on.
One of the biggest challenges, not the biggest challenge in this subject is, and this is true of any subject, but when it comes to UFOs, it's kind of on steroids, and that is separating fact from fiction, from fantasy, from theories, because there's a million theories and lots of different perspectives on what these things could be or not be.
Something strange happened in the skies over Arizona that still hasn't been fully explained.
Fife Symington was one of thousands who witnessed one of the most famous UFO sightings in recent history. He was also governor of Arizona at the time, making him probably the highest public official to ever report a UFO. I met with him at the Arizona Historical Society, where there was a new exhibit to the Phoenix Lights. So take us back, 1997, you're governor of Arizona. You were on your way home from the governor's office, right?
Yes, and I've been listening to the news. There have been some sightings, and I said, you know, I'm going to go take the car, and I'm going to try to get to the high ground and take a look and see if I can see these Phoenix Lights that everybody's talking about. I was being a truant. I was slipped my detail. And I drove my car down and crossed the 51 and went up into this little park, and there were a whole bunch of people. It was really dark, a whole bunch of people standing around, and I just sort of very quietly moved in and turned and looked to the west, which is where the bright lights were. And then somebody in the crowd said, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" And so I pivoted and turned, and there it was. It was coming right over us. You know, with Squaw Peak in the background. It was really majestic. The thing that really was extraordinary was there was absolutely no sound at all, no noise. I mean, and everybody was quiet, and it just passed over, and no jet engine noise, nothing.
So as a pilot yourself, unlike anything...
Never seen anything like it. Never.
Or imagined.
No. I keep telling my friends that nothing will really ever be settled until whoever they are decide to land on the White House lawn and get down and say we've come in peace.
So we know the government has studied UFOs and the phenomenon for decades. But the last known public investigation was a long, long time ago, nearly 50 years ago, when Project Blue Book wrapped up. Since then, as far as we know, the only public effort has been ATIP, the project that was started by Harry Reid. I should mention that these days I'm based most of the time in Arizona, which is the perfect backdrop if you're covering UFOs, because there's lots of history of sightings in the southwest of America. The next step in our guide is to meet the true believers, and you start to see it's not your typical tinfoil hat-wearing fanatics, at least not always. Two of my guides into this world of UFOs have been Karen Brard, who runs the UFO Congress, which is an annual gathering of all sorts of academics, scientists, average citizens who want to know the answers, as well as Alejandro Rojas, who is a journalist, tech writer, who spent many years unpacking fact from fiction in the world of UFOs.
So who is supposed to put this together and release it?
Well, the congressional language is pretty clear. The Director of National Intelligence has to publish a public report by June. And the language is pretty specific.
But there's no way to know whether they're going to be telling the truth or not.
Well, I mean,
I don't think they're gonna lie.
I don't think they're going to make stuff up.
Yeah.
But
they might not.
They might
keep stuff secret.
Yeah.
They
Like,
might
we don't
not
know.
include a lot of things.
Right.
Right.
I'm most interested, I guess, in what the Navy will say because they're the most vested in the whole thing. I mean, it's their fault this even gotten to this point. So what are they going to say?
I think the government has created a lot of their own problem when it comes to this topic. I don't subscribe to the majority of the conspiratorial ideas, and that's due to research.
After the close of Project Blue Book, there was a memo that came out where one of the generals said, that's okay. We didn't need Blue Book anyway. All of the cases that have, are a concern for national security go elsewhere. This data goes into these tiny little pockets here and there. And so hopefully that will be the result. We'll see in this report that they'll be combining.
The question is, okay, once they centralize the information, the government centralizes it, will they share it with the academics, with the scientists outside the government that might be able to make sense of it?
Right, because the government isn't a scientific place, but if they can give, some of the professors some information, maybe they would have to get clearance first in order for them to start working on it. But at least that's a start.
Finally, the last stop on this guide is a former government UFO expert. These sightings and government research isn't just contained in the United States, of course. Nick Pope has become one of the most credible and well-known researchers on the issue of UFOs. He worked for many years studying the issue for the British Ministry of Defense, and I met up with him at his house in Tucson, Arizona.
The second and critical question is, do UAPs represent a possible threat to the defense of the realm? We could argue never shown hostile intent. However, Russian aircraft attempting to penetrate the UK air defence region in the Cold War never showed hostile intent, but they certainly represented a threat. Thus, the only,
just if you show up and you don't do anything doesn't mean that you're not necessarily...
And this is it in a nutshell. Thus, the only logical conclusion that we can come to is that we do not know if UAPs represent a threat to the defence of the realm. And this is defence intelligence, science and technology.
I was a career civil servant in the British government in the Ministry of Defence, so the UK equivalent of the DOD in the States. I was given a job where my duties included researching and investigating the UFO phenomenon to assess any defense implications. I came in really with no baggage, no kind of preconceived notions, really an open mind, and I tried to take a data-led approach.
Do you have any sort of guideposts to figure out, okay, what is credible data?
There are a lot of well-meaning people who see UFOs who just misidentify things, of course. I mean, that's actually the majority of sightings by a clear margin. We dropped UFO and substituted in UAP. And this was something that we did in the Ministry of Defense in the 90s. Now, we didn't invent the term, but we adopted it precisely because we wanted to get within the Ministry of Defense stakeholder engagement. If you go in and say, boss, I'd like some funding for UFOs, no way. If it's like, well, we've got some things going on in our airspace and we want to do a study into unidentified aerial phenomena, it reframes it as maybe a science problem, a defense, national security issue.
Having covered the Pentagon and the military for a long time, I was familiar a little bit with the history of the military looking into these unexplained sightings. From what I've been reporting, very senior people in the US government who have the security clearances you would think that would allow them to know about these secret programs, they claim they don't know about them. One of the things we've tried to do in our reporting is focusing on what the government is doing about them. So what kind of taxpayer dollars is being spent to research these things? What agencies are involved? That leads us to this public report. And I think Congress's intent there is to try and force the government to be a little more organized about it. Because there's all these reports and all of these theories, conspiracy theories about what the government knows and what it might be hiding. Usually the government has the answers. Somebody does. They know where the document is, they know what the enemy is doing, or at least they have a good sense of it. This is like that rare instance where even people who are supposed to know are like, I have no idea.
781 just sped up to 46 knots, 50 knots.
This morning, the sound of U.S. Navy sailors reacting to a radar screen tracking unidentified objects flying around their stealth ship.
Oh, actually 38 knots. Holy fast.
At times, the radar lighting up with 9 objects. It could be similar to those captured on night vision and infrared video, swarming warships for nearly a week in July of 2019, then disappearing without a trace.
So that one's pretty much perfectly 000 relative, right?
Yeah.
At one point, 2 objects suddenly vanishing from the screen, something experts say can happen with smaller targets. But the man who released the leaked video, Jeremy Corbell, says it might suggest the objects went above or below the radar range.
It's moving above the capacity for that radar to see it, or they're moving below, which would mean into the water.
Earlier this month, the filmmaker released another video showing a flying sphere drop into the ocean.
What was splashed?
Saying USOs, or unidentified submerged objects, have also been tracked by the military. When asked about the radar video, a Pentagon spokesperson would only confirm they were taken by Navy personnel and were part of a review of unidentified aerial phenomenon, but wouldn't comment about how they were released.
Why are they confirming these videos that are leaked to you?
They want to be ahead of it, and they're out of options. There's a lot of pressure by the global public and the American public, for answers.
And after years of Navy fighter pilots also reporting other incidents where flying objects seem to accelerate instantly or fly at supersonic speeds without breaking the sound barrier, lawmakers on intelligence committees are demanding answers.
There's enough obvious evidence here that we need to take this seriously, not downplay it, and try to gather as much information as we can to figure out what is it these pilots are seeing and what does it mean.
Right now, there are a lot of unanswered questions. And of course, if other nations have capabilities that we don't know of, we want to find out. If there's some explanation other than that, we want to learn that too.
Gotti, we mentioned that looming intelligence report on UFOs from the Pentagon. What can we expect from that?
Well, Chanel, technically that report is due around the end of June, but there is a chance it could be delayed. And there's also some debate over whether this could be Russia or China, who have invested heavily in advanced drone technology. But one source told me that if this does turn out to be a different country, brazenly mocking our warships right off of our own coast night after night, this could represent an intelligence failure so big it might make some in the Pentagon wish these were actually from somewhere else.
Wait to find that out. My goodness. All right, Gotti, thank you.
Wow. What do you think, Dylan Dreyer? You think that they're
life
UFOs?
I think maybe they're UFOs from the future. Like technology has advanced so far to the point that the future, it's like...
Perhaps I should have just asked you about the weekend weather. Maybe
You trust that a little bit more?
Maybe we should stick to the forecast.
We'll stick to that. Not that it's a great forecast for you, but it is a forecast.